Okay, let's dive right into one of the absolute strangest historical mysteries of Minnesota. Today's explainer is all about a site known to the Dakota as Wakan Tipi, the dwelling of the Great Spirit, and later known to European settlers as Carver's Cave. Now, what makes this place so utterly fascinating is that it's a cave every single explorer claimed had dramatically changed since the last person saw it. I mean, people said it was expanding, collapsing, vanishing, shifting dimensions. Yet modern geological evidence proves it barely changed at all.
So the really crucial point here is this wild juxtaposition between historical perception and geological reality. For over 2 centuries, the things people thought they saw completely overwhelmed the actual physical reality of Wakan Tipi. Instead of just being a geological feature, the cave became a projection screen. It was literally a blank canvas for frontier mythology, romanticism, and the wild imaginations of every traveler who passed through. The most consistent feature of this cave's history is, ironically, its inconsistency.
Let's kick things off with Act 1, exploring the wrong caves.
To figure out how this massive misunderstanding actually started, we have to look at Jonathan Carver. He visited what he called the Great Cave in 1766 and again in 1767. Now, his published account of a remarkable cave of an amazing depth was highly perceptive in some ways. Like, he correctly noted the soft sandstone and the underground lake, but he hugely exaggerated its overall size. Carver's rhetoric transformed a relatively modest, spring-cut cave into this massive continental wonder, and in doing so, he sparked a generations-long game of historical telephone.
And honestly, early visitors were just completely looking through a lens of frontier romanticism. They expected a vast, mythical underground world rather than a modest, damp sandstone cave. Because of Carver's exaggerated writings, people arrived fully expecting a wonder of the world. And their brains simply filled in the blanks to match those grand expectations.
Now, what's really interesting is that highly respected explorers eventually started making wild claims based on those expectations. In 1817, Major Stephen H. Long visited and complained it was so cramped he had to crawl. Then, in 1820, Henry Schoolcraft confidently claimed that the cave had undergone considerable alteration and was rapidly shrinking or collapsing since Carver's time. They both implied this dramatic, rapid geological change was happening right before their very eyes.
But here is the brilliant twist. They were almost certainly standing in completely different locations. They didn't see a changing cave. They were just lost. Major Long probably mistook nearby Dayton's Cave for Carver's Cave. Schoolcraft almost certainly confused it with another spot called Fountain Cave. So Carver's Cave acquired this crazy reputation for dramatic, shape-shifting transformation simply because explorers were unknowingly wandering into entirely different caves.
Let's break down how this built into pure absurdity. In 1823, an eccentric Italian traveler named Giacomo Beltrami took this geographical confusion to the absolute next level. He literally fused the physical dimensions and stream of Fountain Cave with the sacred Dakota history of Carver's Cave. He created an impossible mythological hybrid in his writings. He wasn't just misidentifying a cave, he was unconsciously mythologicizing the entire Mississippi bluff system into a place that physically could not exist.
Moving right along to Act 2, Railroads and Imaginary Chambers.
By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, geographical confusion gave way to pure sensationalism, leading to what I call the railroad paradox. By 1867, historians were writing that the cave had remained essentially unchanged for a century, but in the exact same breath, they claimed railroad construction had essentially hauled the cave away and nearly destroyed it. Yet, when surveyors actually compared maps from different decades, they found surprisingly little difference in the total passage length. This proves that the symbolic destruction of the romantic landscape felt so tragic to people that they exaggerated the actual physical loss of the stone.
Then came the rediscovery. A man named John H. Caldwell reopened the entrance in 1913, which triggered an absolute media frenzy. At the exact moment in history when modern geology was supposedly becoming more rigorous and objective, journalism around the cave became wildly exaggerated and completely unscientific.
I mean, the newspapers completely lost their minds. They published maps of imaginary hidden passages and touted biologically impossible discoveries. They claimed to find exotic blind crayfish, weird subterranean vegetation, and get this, a massive fourth chamber with a 50-foot ceiling and hidden streams. None of this was real. It proved a fascinating human quirk. The more scientifically accessible the cave became, the more its mythological story grew to fill the void.
Which brings us to Act 3,
Wrong theories, right observations.
You'd think the scientific community would be immune to this cycle of contradiction, right? Well, not exactly. What's fascinating is this total inversion of scientific progress. Early scientists had completely incorrect theories. They mistakenly thought the cave was formed in limestone, or they dated it way back to pre-Cretaceous times, which is impossible. But their actual physical measurements of the walls and water were excellent. Conversely, later experts who had much more advanced geological knowledge just blindly repeated the exaggerated folklore from those 1913 newspapers. Knowledge increased, but certainty actually diminished.
So why was everyone so panicked about the cave collapsing? Well, the panic was actually just ordinary surface erosion. Carver's Cave is formed in the St. Peter sandstone, with a limestone cap on top. Over time, debris from that limestone cap kept eroding, piling up, and blocking the entrance. Visitors would arrive, see a blocked or shrinking doorway, and mistakenly think the entire cave behind it was vanishing. It was the illusion of geological drama, an unstable doorway leading to a highly stable cave.
Okay, let's shift gears to the ecological paradox.
Perhaps the most surprising contradiction here isn't in the stone at all, it's in the biology. Let's step through this bizarre food web. Carver's Cave has absolutely zero sunlight, right? Which means no photosynthesis can occur. Yet, it supports a thriving functional ecosystem. How? It's entirely dependent on death and decay blowing in from the outside surface. Decaying leaves blow into the darkness. Tiny amphipods eat that detritus. Cave fish eat the amphipods, and other creatures like frogs and snails thrive in that cold groundwater. Life underground is entirely sustained by death from above.
And remember those exotic blind crayfish the 1913 newspapers were screaming about? Well, actually, they were just these ordinary cold spring amphipods, just completely common invertebrates. But they were entirely misinterpreted by reporters looking for a sensational Jules Verne-style scoop. The deeper the investigation became, the more ordinary the explanations actually proved to be.
And this bizarre ecological continuity stretches right up to the modern era. In 1999, observers discovered a beaver living right inside the cave entrance directly beneath the bustling city. It was absurdly out of place. It totally blurred the boundary between urban ruin and wilderness habitat. The cave persists today as both a historical relic and a living, breathing habitat.
That leads us to preservation through damage. Ultimately, our interaction with Wakan Tipi is this profound story of well-intentioned yet completely destructive interference. Every single intervention damaged one aspect of the cave while ironically preserving another. Early tourism damaged the petroglyphs, but it kept the cave in public memory. The railroad stripped the entrance, but stopped complete urban development over it. Even installing protective steel doors in 1977 just invited more vandalism and digging. We consistently damaged the very thing we were trying to save, yet that exact damage is why it hasn't been completely erased by the city above it.
This leaves us with the ultimate paradox of today's explainer. Beneath 2 centuries of geographical mix-ups, sensational journalism, and scientific miscalculations, the physical stone of Carver's Cave was incredibly stable. As the source text beautifully puts it, the cave changed least in stone and most in imagination.
Every single generation essentially just invented the cave they wanted to see. Whether they needed a sacred sanctuary, a collapsing ruin, a scientific mystery, or a lost world beneath the city, they projected that desire right onto the sandstone walls of Wakan Tipi. The contradictions aren't just a part of its history, they literally are its history.
It really makes you wonder, right? As we look back at the places we preserve and the stories we tell about them, how many other historic landmarks have we shaped more with our collective imagination than with the truth? Think about that next time you visit a famous site. Until next time, keep questioning the history beneath your feet.